Name is Sam for people that don't know me. And what I love talking about and what I love doing with my life, especially right now, is talking about God. Now I don't know if you guys caught that, but let me try this all over again. My name's Sam, and for the people that don't know me, it doesn't matter about that anyways. I'm not here to glorify myself. Basically, I'm here to tell people that there's a way in life. There's a way in life for people that don't know the way or don't know what to do with their lives. And let's put it this way: the ultimate goal in life, of what I've learned, is that enlightenment, God consciousness, and God. So what I love talking about and what I always loved talking about my whole entire life was God. But in my life, I did not come to Scripture. I don't have a religion. I never had a religion. All I wanted to know was the truth, and if there is a God. That should be on most people's mind, considering doesn't matter what time that we lived in or times of the past that human beings have lived in. We all live in misery, and we all live in victory. See, there's always going to be points in people's lives where there's going to be this duality. Let's put it that way. You're going to win some and you're going to lose some. And some people in their minds, they're going to hold on to these experiences of winning and losing. And some people get caught up in their consciousness or in their minds that that's what life entails, winning and losing, gaining and losing at the same time, gaining a job, gaining money, and then, oh, woe is you if that thing in life gets taken away from you. Your job gets taken away from you, or your whatever the human being wants to attach itself to in this life. If he gets it taken away from him, he's going to wonder if there's a God. And if things are going good in people's lives, that's when you have the intellect, running wild, you could say, and forming concepts. Let's say if the human being has a good job, a good house, everything good, okay? He might not even care about God. He might not even care about the deeper things in life, asking the questions that, one might have in life, like, why is there so much iniquity? I might have good, but why doesn't everybody else have so much good? Maybe those things won't cross certain people's minds because of their material disposition in life. Some people might just believe that all there is just this material creation, atoms, if you will. And we can get into that as well too. See, this is what's wonderful about being on the path, is you have to understand where you are. And in this life, you're living in the material world. You're living in atoms. So let's talk about atoms a little bit. Atoms are, you can't see atoms. So that's another thing that also, brought about a lot of great thought into me, is old cultures and civilizations like the Greeks, the Egyptians, and the Indians from India, 4 or 5,000 years ago, BC, have knowledge of the atoms, and they don't have any technology to look under the microscope and see those things. So how did they discover the atoms when you can't see those things? Basically, the universe, in our scientific mode of thinking, the universe, the materialistic universe, was created by atoms, by an event known as the Big Bang. So one tiny little particle. And an atom is comprised of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But let's go before all of that. One little tiny atom and an insurmountable energy passed through that atom and expanded into this whole entire universe, which created you, me, and everything else inside of it. All the different forms came from one atom, which just expanded. And that's one of the mysteries of life, too. It says now that the human being is comprised of 7 billion of these tiny little particles, and it appears that the human being is in solid form. much people don't embrace modern science, not even our culture. Our culture doesn't embrace in thought. See, this is where coming to truth is. You have to embrace the truth all the time. And human beings don't embrace their atomic structure. And the thing is with atoms is that there's about 7 billion of these tiny particles that make what appears to be this solid body. And science went even further in string theory to say that these atoms now aren't so material. They're actually vibrations. Like if one were to throw a rock on the water and you would see these ripples, what your body is these ripples that appear to be hardened material form. Basically, vibrations form atoms, which form material form. But at the same time, these atoms, right, they're 7 billion tiny little particles that make up the human form. But each one of these particles is so infinitely far apart from each other. So, how could I put that in an analogy? You know, it's like throwing a whole bunch of, grab sand in your hands and put it on the ground and say all of that mess makes a perfect form of a human being. The mystery of atoms is still a mystery to modern science as well, too. And even the composition of a human being is a mystery because, again, these atoms might appear as solid substance, but each one is so far apart from each other. It's like a connect the dot. Remember those connect the dot pictures? You'd have one dot and one dot over here, 1, 2, 3, and they just make a picture if you connect the lines. Well, imagine that each dot is so far apart from each other that how are you going to connect these lines? See, so that's some of the mysteries of creation. And how are you going to account for that? Modern science says, too, that there's a substance known as dark matter. And all this material creation is like 1% of the totality of creation. So just imagine like you're underwater and then your face just comes up on the water, right? That's your face coming up on the water is basically like material creation. And the water itself is the actual real creation as is known as dark matter. So science is trying to come up with answers to fill in these mysterious gaps of creation. But they don't account God as the source of creation or the creator. And that's one big folly of man is he needs to go back to his creator in order to understand creation, in order to understand himself, and even to understand his situation and where he is in life as well. Most people don't even embrace the scientific concepts of atoms that form their physical body, which is why there's a lot of ailments in society. So why do people get sick? Well, because they believe in a fleshly body. They believe in the fact that there's their material form inside their heads. And that's another thing that's a mysterious transcendental truth that we'll get onto a little bit later. But there is a path back way to God. God is real. That's another thing too. It took a very long time. It's almost like going to the gym. You're not going to bench press 300 pounds as soon as you walk into the door. You're going to have to go to this place, gather the correct amount of knowledge, apply that knowledge, and as the days progress, the weeks progress, the months and the years, so too will your body progress with the correct knowledge. You have to have that correct knowledge. That's also the pathway back to God, is the correct letter of truth. God is real, and that's also one of the messages that I also want to bring to the table. Now, what type of God, though? See, I didn't get into scriptures up until 2022. And that's scriptures of now. Once I had a very fantastic moment in one's experience happen. And it was a product of all of my life searching for the truth. And the truth finally revealed itself. So the goal of life is God consciousness. And one can obtain God consciousness, or what is known as enlightenment or the Holy Grail, in this life, and there is a way to do it. Now, I only tried to know God, so I myself in my journey all my life just kind of ignored religion, because on the first steps to higher knowledge, I only was interested in transcendental knowledge. So what that means was just how you could develop your consciousness. And also what that means is, since we're in this material creation, okay, no one can really escape the material creation. And let's put it this way, since the earth is going around the sun, all things in this creation are moving and living. This creation is living. And the human being has to bring his consciousness up to speed, if you will, to the living creation. And that's also the process of enlightenment according to Scripture. And that's even in Lao Tzu. See, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching is Scripture. And according to him and his enlightenment, that's what enlightenment kind of qualifies towards to, is building your consciousness to the space-time continuum. See, human beings also don't live by these truths. Not only do they live by the atomic structure of the body, but they also just fail to realize that this living universe is just that, and everything moves. And the human being, because he doesn't realize these things, is living in darkness. So these words like darkness, like enlightenment, concepts like God and religion, they're not concepts. Those are states of consciousness that have to be awakened to. You have to be awakened out of mortality. And there is such a difference as mortal consciousness and immortal or God awareness, and how one lives their life actually. So let's get on to that. How does one go on the path, or become, or let's put it this way, no human being has the wisdom to contact God. It's the other way around. God seeks us out. So how does God make itself known to our consciousness? Well, it's very simple. One has to first gather the proper knowledge and then devote themselves to that acquisition of that endeavor. So the only endeavor in one's life at this point is enlightenment, to obtain the light that enlightens all men. And that could happen without the knowledge of Scripture. If you have a spiritual teacher and the teacher teaches you about, now here's the thing, this is the teaching of God, right? This isn't brought by men. So the teaching of God is this: God is infinite, God is invisible, God is omnipresent, so only one presence, one intelligence, omniscience, and the only power, omnipotence. Now, it doesn't seem like that in this world, right? Because there's the physical laws of nature, what the human beings call disease, and what the human being called prosperity. See, he doesn't go by the multiplicative effect that nature already has. Nature already produces, you could say, the invisible aspects of God, which is immortality. You can see that the seasons never change. They never go out of course. There's always going to be winter, spring, summer, and fall, and the multiplicative effects in between through the plants and animals. But human beings like to make progress faster. They don't go by the laws of what is shown to them. So if the human being wants something in our society, you could go on your internet and whatever, you could go on Amazon and buy whatever you want, get whatever you want at any time you want. See, the human being forgot about seasons. He has to wait for things to come in. And the human beings don't want to wait. So they lose this connection with the actual principles of life. And because their consciousness is disconnected and disassociated from principles of life, the human being thinks he could acquire anything at any given time. Let's say like apples. Oh yeah, you can just get an apple in the middle of winter because there's a grocery store. And that's not necessarily the laws of nature. You can't just get an apple any old time you please. But man has manipulated his circumstance of survival, and because of that, he's taken himself away from the natural principles of the invisible. The invisible is just an observation of, well, the visible is just an observation of the invisible process of life. Now, this isn't just a cliche subject about consciousness and about life. There is a process to basically unfold one's consciousness, almost like a flower unfolds itself through the many seasons. And the secret is you have to understand your identity. And for the human being, this might be difficult. The acquisition of truth towards spiritual principles are very difficult for the human being to understand and apply. He has to apply these things. So one of the first secrets is understanding your invisible nature. Now, just like there's an invisible process outside of one's own consciousness, the human being has to understand that there's also invisible processes within inside himself. And that self is invisible. That's the secret. Is, let's put it this way, your thoughts and your feelings, what has been defined as, you could say, a soul or a spirit inside man, what's making me think and feel is invisible. No one's ever seen who I am. And that's the part about spiritual identification, is this thing that we call I. Now, I appear in the flesh, but this I is invisible because no one's ever seen me. No one's ever carved open a human being and seen their thoughts and feelings, what animates the human, what animates the flesh. See, doctors and psychologists have never seen what people call a mind. The mind is invisible. No one's ever found it out in the world. That's what one would constitute as the Holy Grail. If one has ever seen the mind out in the world, then they would have the Holy Grail. They would have the answers of life. But that's never ever happened. So even when spiritual teachers would say you can't worship in holy places or holy mountains, that's because there is no such thing as a holy place or a holy mountain, because the mind isn't exactly externalized. No one's ever found the source of your being. And that's a truth, just like living in the atomic truth of your body. See, that people don't live by this atomic truth, and they're not going to live by this spiritual truth that their thoughts and feelings, or who they are, is invisible. So if you don't embrace these things, you can't apply this knowledge, and you can't grow within spiritual knowledge. So it's just like if you want to go to the gym and get in shape, all right? It doesn't matter how overweight or underweight you are. You have to gather the correct amount of knowledge, and it doesn't matter if you don't agree with that knowledge. See, that's how when people go to the gym, right? And they devise their own methods or their own techniques or their own way of doing things, and that's what constitutes failure. You have to conform to the way. If you don't agree with the principles, then maybe you're not cut out for that line of art, and you have to analyze yourself. If you're not cut out for it, then you're not cut out. What could I say? You can't argue with the principles. Now, if you want to live the spiritual path, you have to understand where you're living. You're living in an atomic material creation, okay? That's basically invisible, because not only does the atomic principle apply to your body, where the atoms are infinitely spread apart from each other, and our vibration at its constitutional form, not only just for the human being, but for also the earth, for the universe. Everything is constituted by string or vibration. So it's invisible. Not only is the atomic creation constituted by this invisible nature, in itself it is inexplicably invisible, but also the human being himself is invisible. That's also one of the mysteries of creation. Even though there's so much tangible form, oh yes, I know, there's tangible, believe me, yeah, everyone can hear it and feel it, but the secret is that form or those laws outside here do not exist inside your consciousness. Inside there is no form or no matter. There cannot be. And here's a simple truth. The reason why you're invisible is because you can't just, when I'm hungry, I can't make an apple out of my mind and go off and eat it. I'm not a magician. I'm not a sorcerer. Sorcerers in the past, you could say, see, atoms aren't just exclusive to the body. They are also the invisible presence. So, and they're also constituted of light. That's another mystery as well, too. Your body is light, but it appears as solid form. And magicians of old have been able to like recreate form into what they want people to see. So I'm not that I agree in times of old, like let's say in the Bible when Moses had to battle the Egyptians. When he first went there, he battled the Egyptian sorcerers. He had to throw his staff down and his staff transformed into a snake. Well, how the hell do you do that? I have no idea. That's sorcery. That's understanding atoms and manipulating their form through basically the force of nature, which is electromagnetism. So there's also a reason why science can't bridge the gap into finding what they want, which is a universal principle. Science wants to find why the forces of nature are acting as one principle known as life. And let's talk about the scientific principle, because that's a little bit important as well too. Science believes in 4 fundamental forces. And this is what Einstein, or at least the theory that led up to this revelation, known as the GUT, or the Grand Unified Theory. And the Grand Unified Theory just states that there's 4 fundamental forces of nature that comprise this one phenomenon known as life. And the 4 forces of nature are weak and strong nuclear force. So what that means is like how objects might decay. So let's say like rust on a car. That rust decaying the metal is known as weak force because objects decay, like physical corpses. When I die, my corpse is going to decay, and that's a force of nature. Also growth of material substance like plants or human body, anything that grows also is a function of the one life. And that's called strong nuclear force. And then there's electromagnetism, and then there's gravity. All of these forces is what's known as the one life, keeping me on the ground here and keeping the body not from splitting apart into a billion pieces. But man has discerned these as 4 forces. Now, these 4 forces have a hard time living in the atomic view of science because there's something known as quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics is the study of atoms, basically. And then there's, you could say, the macrocosmic cosmology, which is the study of bigger formations like our human bodies and planets. So let's put it this way. The fundamental force of gravity is very difficult to explain on the quantum mechanics scale. The thing that's bothering scientists right now is gravity. They have no idea how gravity works. They have an idea how gravity works on the large scale of existence, but they can't find how it works on the smallest scale of existence, on the quantum mechanics scale, because atoms appear so small and have so little weight that gravity cannot be applied to them. So it appears that gravity just doesn't exist on these smaller planes of existence, but on our scale of existence, it's a predominant force. So they're trying to bridge the gap between the big and the small, and trying to understand this one principle and this one phenomenon known as life. And they're trying to do that with Large Hadron Colliders. Basically what they're trying to do is grab these atoms, smash them together, and find an effect that will bring them back to the source of the Big Bang. And all of this is futile. All of it is futile because it's just knowledge of matter. And what they don't understand is the invisible property behind it. And that's where spiritual consciousness comes into play. One has to have spiritual consciousness in order to understand creation. So one has to actually go to their creator. And again, how do we do that? That's devotional services to the Lord. So maybe I could explain that in another video actually, because 25 minutes already in, I did enough speaking. And I'm just trying to get people to believe in God and to understand some of the things and some of the ideas actually that you have to embrace. Like if you don't embrace the atomic principle of creation, and if you don't embrace the invisible nature of yourself and that creation, then you're not going to make it far on the spiritual path. You have to embrace your invisible nature. That's just like, again, if you go to the gym and you don't embrace the principles of training properly, like let's say if you train right, but you don't eat right and you don't sleep right, well, you're not going to embrace the principles properly, and you're not going to grow and develop properly as well because you accumulated the wrong knowledge to obtain that goal. And with God, it's the same thing. You have to obtain the proper knowledge, work within the correct letter of truth, and then you'll obtain enlightenment. But that happens not overnight, just like you can't go into the gym and bench press 300 pounds that very same day. You got to work and apply. And I'll talk about some of those things in another video. But this has been fun. Thanks for whoever's tuning in and watching. And take care, everybody.